47 minutes. That is how long Meghan Markle reportedly lasted inside Highgrove before the cars were moving again.
Meghan Markle felt humiliated on Prince Harry's most recent UK trip, and that the trip turned into a nightmare, forcing Markle and her children to return home to California earlier than they had hoped.
She had flown 4,500 miles with 2 children to see a king who had not laid eyes on them since June 2022, and she left with no photograph, no statement, and a palace that never confirmed the afternoon happened. Something in that house reportedly went differently than she had planned for, and the clock is only the first clue.
I think the king right now, his best bet would be to distance himself completely, make it clear to Harry that the Sussexes are not welcome at all in Britain.
Tom Bower thinks he knows what it was. So what actually happened in those 47 minutes? 47 minutes and nothing to show. The facts are thin and they are stubborn. A meeting took place at Highgrove between King Charles, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and both children. Queen Camilla was reportedly present. It was the first time the king had seen Archie and Lilibet in person since the Platinum Jubilee of June 2022. Reports put Meghan's presence at 47 minutes. Afterwards, no image was released, no joint statement was issued, and the palace made no comment. That last part is not an oversight. Royal households are practiced at marking reconciliations, and they mark them with pictures. The palace chose to say nothing, and saying nothing is itself a position. Compare it with any other family occasion the household has wanted recognized, and the gap is obvious. Christenings, birthdays, anniversaries, and hospital visits all produce a frame. This produced none. Bower's argument begins there, in the silence, and it runs in a direction most coverage missed. His question was not why the meeting was short, it was why it happened at all, why they got on the plane. For weeks, the reporting had been that Meghan would not travel. The reason given was security, the same argument the Sussexes have made since 2020. Without taxpayer-funded protection, a return to Britain is not viable. Then, without explanation, she and both children were on a plane. Bower's reading is that the trip was never primarily about repair. He has argued the Sussexes needed visible proximity to the institution because their commercial position depends on it, and that a family visit was the cheapest available route to that proximity. Others put it more simply and more kindly. A father wanted his children to meet their grandfather while there was still time, and read no strategy into it beyond that. It should be said that Bower has been arguing a version of this since before the couple left Britain, and a theory that explains every outcome equally well is a theory worth checking. Still, the sequence of the trip does not sit comfortably with the security argument. If protection made travel impossible in principle, the flight required an explanation nobody has given. Whichever it was, they arrived expecting one set of arrangements and found another waiting. The door marked Invictus. The accommodation was the first thing to go. Reports indicate an offer of a stay at Buckingham Palace had been made and was then withdrawn on the day of travel, a reversal later confirmed by a spokesperson. Whatever the reason, the effect was immediate. They landed in a country where they no longer had a room. If you want the full sequence of what followed that reversal and what Bower says it cost them, subscribe now, because the withdrawal of that offer is the moment the rest of the visit becomes readable. There was a second door, and Harry has spent a decade building it. The Invictus Games remain the one part of his public life the institution has never disowned, and under ordinary circumstances, a senior royal at an opening ceremony would be routine. Reports suggest the palace has grown cautious because any appearance involving the Sussexes generates a fortnight of coverage nobody in the household wants. Highgrove did not make that decision easier. There is a fair objection to reading too much into the accommodation reversal. Royal residences run on logistics, refurbishment schedules, and security assessments that change without malice, and a withdrawn offer is not automatically a snub. But the timing was hard to present as neutral, and the couple were left explaining a decision they had not made. So the couple arrived with the accommodation gone and the one reliable bridge under review. And yet, the king still took the meeting. The meeting. The king could not cancel. Bower's view is that Charles had almost no room to refuse, and the reasoning is not sentimental. A monarch who declines to see his own grandchildren, having not seen them since 2022, becomes a story that runs for a week and damages him more than any concession would. There is also the matter of age. Charles is in his 70s and has been treated for cancer since early 2024. Time is a live consideration, in a way it was not 5 years ago, and Bauer has argued the Sussexes understood that as clearly as anyone. So, the meeting went ahead, but it went ahead on the household's terms and in the king's private house rather than a palace, with the format set in advance. Reports described an atmosphere closer to an appointment than a reunion. Highgrove itself is not a grand stage. It is a working house with a garden Charles has spent 40 years building, the least ceremonial setting the monarch has, and the choice to hold it there was itself a message. This is private, and private things are not published. Anyone who has visited Highgrove knows the scale of it. The house is modest by royal standards, the gardens are the point, and the whole place has the quality of somewhere lived in, rather than presented. It is where Charles goes to stop being the king for a few hours. Choosing it meant the encounter could be warm without being official, and it meant nothing that happened there carried institutional weight. That is a concession and a limit in the same gesture. 47 minutes is how long a difficult conversation lasts when nobody wants it to fail and nobody knows how to make it succeed. But something else about the room changed what could be said in it. The witness in the room, Queen Camilla, was reportedly present, and Bauer treats that as the most consequential detail of the day. A conversation with a third person in it is a different conversation. Grievances that could be raised between a father and a son cannot easily be raised in front of a witness, because raising them turns a private complaint into a public accusation. Apologies work the same way in reverse. An apology offered in front of someone else is a matter of record, and records can be quoted. Harry's characterization of Camilla in Spare, published in January 2023, has never been publicly addressed by either of them. Her presence made the one subject that most needed airing the one subject nobody could open. What remains when the difficult material is off the table is weather, children, gardens, and the polite architecture of an English afternoon. There is a mechanical point underneath this that has nothing to do with anyone's character. Reconciliations require someone to go first, and going first requires the possibility of being refused without an audience. Remove the privacy and you remove the willingness. Neither man in that room could risk the vulnerable version of the conversation, because the vulnerable version leaks, and both of them have watched private family material become public more than once in the past 6 years. What replaces it is a conversation in which everyone performs civility competently, and nothing is resolved. Bauer reads her presence as deliberate, a decision to ensure nothing could be extracted and later characterized. That is his interpretation, not a reported fact. And there is an obvious alternative. She lives there, and it was her house too. Either way, the constraint was real, and it explains the clock better than any theory about hostility. 47 minutes is roughly how long small talk lasts before it runs out. What happened next was the part nobody had planned for. The photograph that never came. Nothing was released, not a frame. It is worth being precise about what that denial was worth. In the current attention economy, a single image of the king on the steps at Highgrove with his son, his daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren would have been reproduced in every major market within an hour and would have carried a meaning no caption could dilute. The family has accepted them back. That meaning is not decorative. It underwrites brand partnerships, streaming interest, publishing advances, and every negotiation the Sussexes enter for the following 5 years. Bauer's argument is that this is precisely why it was withheld, and that the household understood the value better than the couple did. The palace position, as reported, was procedural rather than punitive. This was not a state visit, not an official engagement, but a private family visit. And private family visits are not photographed for distribution. Both things can be true at once. Consider what the household gave up by refusing. A warm image would have been overwhelmingly popular. It would have shown a grandfather with 2 small children, and would have generated a week of favorable coverage at a moment when the monarchy has been managing questions about the king's health. The palace declined a public relations win it could have banked easily. Whatever the reasoning, it was not the path of least resistance, and that is the strongest evidence that the refusal was considered rather than incidental. The consequence was the same either way. Since 2020, nearly every significant moment in the Sussexes' public life has come with an image they controlled, released on their timing. Highgrove produced only long lens footage of cars arriving and cars leaving, shot by people who owed them nothing and interpreted by everyone else. There is one further loss in the absence, easy to overlook. A photograph would also have functioned as a record for the children themselves. the sort of image that sits on a shelf long after the adults have stopped arguing about what it meant. Meghan and the children reportedly returned to the United States ahead of Harry, who stayed on for Invictus preparations. 47 minutes and nothing to publish. And in the gap where a photograph should have been, Bauer placed his warning. What Bauer told the king to do next. Here is where his account turns from analysis into advice, and where it is most exposed. Bauer has argued that the Sussexes' financial position is weaker than presented, that the deals announced with such confidence have not converted into what the announcements implied. He has not audited their accounts. Nobody outside their companies has. It is his reading of public numbers, and he says so. From that reading, he draws a conclusion about the children. His claim is that attention has shifted toward Archie and Lilibet as the route back, because a grandfather is easier to reach than an institution, and because a monarch in his 70s who has been treated for cancer has fewer years in which to be reached. He believes the king should therefore hold a firm line, contact, but no restoration of status, no titles, no half return. Set that beside the one thing the day did not produce. There is no photograph anywhere in the world of King Charles with those two grandchildren, not from Highgrove, not from the Jubilee weekend, not from anywhere. Whatever anyone believes about strategy, motive, or money, that is the fact underneath all of it. An old man, two small children, 3 years, and no picture of them together. The children are the only people in this story who did nothing to arrive at it. It is worth separating the two halves of this. That the king has not been photographed with these grandchildren is a fact. That the children are being positioned as leverage is Bauer's inference about intent. And intent is the one thing no outside observer can see. A father who has moved his family across an ocean might simply want his children to know their grandfather before the opportunity is gone, and that reading fits every visible fact just as well. Bauer's counsel is that the king should not let that absence be used as leverage. It is worth noticing that Charles does not appear to have followed it. Charles's actual behavior, allowing contact while withholding status, looks less like Bauer's recommendation and more like a man keeping a door on the latch. Why it matters. The honest ledger is short, and it should be read before anyone treats this as settled. Almost every emotional detail of that afternoon is secondhand. The 47-minute figure has not been confirmed by anyone in the household, and other accounts have put the meeting closer to 90 minutes. Descriptions of Meghan's mood as she left rest on body language filmed at distance, which is the weakest evidence available and would be dismissed in any other context. Bauer is not a neutral party. He has written 2 critical books and has a professional stake in this reading being the correct one. His financial claims remain inference from outside the accounts. What survives all of that is still substantial because it consists of things that were done rather than things that were felt. The accommodation offer was withdrawn on the day of travel, and a spokesperson confirmed it. The meeting was held privately rather than at a palace. Camilla was in the room. No photograph was released. No statement was issued. The Duchess and the children left ahead of the Duke. Those are not interpretations. They are decisions, each one made by someone, and they point the same way. Bauer's reading of that is that the door has closed. The gentler reading is that it was never opened wide enough for either side to find out. The second reading is more generous and may well be right, but it carries its own problem because ambiguity has a shelf life. An open door held open too long stops being an open door. What Highgrove settled then is not whether the rift can be repaired, but what repair would now cost. The institution demonstrated it can grant access without granting status, and that it is prepared to absorb the criticism that comes with saying nothing afterwards. That is a durable position. It requires no negotiation and no announcement, and it can be held indefinitely. Which leaves Meghan Markle roughly where she was before she boarded the plane, minus the thing she flew for. She arrived hoping for a signal that the family had received her back. She left with 47 minutes, no image, no words, and a return flight. And in a business built entirely on visible association, nothing is a harder result than refusal, because refusal at least gives you a grievance you can talk about. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the Invictus Games in Birmingham will be the next real test of whether any of this moved, and whoever does or does not attend will answer the question this meeting left open. Then tell me in the comments, was 47 minutes a deliberate message from King Charles, or just an ordinary awkward family afternoon that the rest of us have read far too much into?